Hi, Kelly.
Oh, Kelly on now.
Yeah, I'm on now. I never know if I'm on or not on.
Yes, we can see you.
Good to see you.
Oh, sorry, I'm not very technically minded.
Oh, don't worry about that. No problem. But we're just going around and doing a welfare check to see how everybody is.
Terrible circumstances that we're living under at the moment, aren't we?
Yeah.
My friend here, her mother-in-law died yesterday, 93, and they can't even get home to see her or the funeral.
Oh, yeah.
That's awful.
It's terrible.
I know, it's just and you just hear so many, you just hear so many different stories.
Yeah.
The problem is you don't hear a lot of positive stories under these circumstances, and I just think, I know we're in bad times and I know it's hard, but I still think we still all got to try and be positive in some sort of way, or project some positive energy to each other. I mean, the good news is Donald Trump's disappeared. That's one good thing.
Yay.
Yes,
you met him, didn't you, Kelly? You met him, didn't you? I've seen a picture in here.
Yeah, I met Donald Trump. I met him I've got to go back. It probably would have been in the 90s. Yes, it would have been after 93 when, because he was the big hotel owner in Atlantic City at the time and owned most of the casinos. And we had to do 3 boxing shows from Atlantic City, and he was the main investor in them. And that's when I met him. Very arrogant man, very controlling man, thinks he knows everything, even if he doesn't know anything about the subject, and just not a nice person, and has no respect for women. I mean, totally no respect for women or anyone unless they're like a right macho male like he thinks he is, which he's far from.
All right.
Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah.
No, it's fine. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay. Right. So are you, where have you gone, Elizabeth? Oh, right.
I'm here.
Yeah. Okay. So are you going to do the interview now then with
if that's okay,
Kelly?
Yeah.
If everybody else could mute, please. Except for Elizabeth.
I am happy, just so you know, I'm happy to take any questions at the end if anyone wants to.
That's what we're going to do, Kelly, if that's okay.
Yeah. To ask anything.
Yeah, I mean, I've been reading your book, Kelly. Having met you previously, I've just been reading your book, Frankly Kelly, which I found, very, very moving and touching. As I told you, in like so many ways, because some of it related to me as well. But when this book starts, of course, it's when you've spoken to the Sunday Mirror, and the story is about to break. About how you're feeling inside.
2014.
And 14, yeah. So do you want to talk a little bit about your journey from there to now, or?
Yeah, I mean, my journey's been, obviously, once I was able to be truthful to myself and look in the mirror and realize that most of my life had been a lie, though it had been, shall we say, a glorious lie, because I was living in a sort of a fantasy world of top sports personalities and that. But no one ever saw the side of me that was away from that side, the side that used to sit there and cry themselves to sleep at night, wish that they could not wake up in the morning, so I would no longer have to live through the agony that I was living through. And then we all respect our fathers, and we all never want to upset our dads. My dad was very important to me in my life, because it was my dad that encouraged me to chase my dream in boxing and to become a boxing manager. And he had me on a pedestal, and I could never ever tell my dad or disappoint my dad, because he was a Irish working man, Catholic, loved his sport, loved everything, very, very old and very traditional. And I'm sure if I'd have turned around and said to him how I felt, he would never have understood it. And I never wanted to lose my dad's respect. So, in the book, I talk about when my dad became ill, and I spent lots of time sitting with him, and I really wanted to tell him, And I remember the day the day he died in that late that evening. We were all there, the three of us, and he just said, "Boys, I've got to tell you something. I've enjoyed my life. My brain is active, but I have no quality of life, and this is not the way for a man to live." He said, "I just want God to take me," because my father was quite religious. And I really wanted to tell him. I remember taking his hand and I went, "Dad, you've really been my inspiration. You've helped me, but I've got something to tell you." And I looked at his eyes and but I just couldn't tell him. And I just said, "Dad, I love you." And I left. And he died that night. And it was just after that, I realized that then a boxer that I managed committed suicide. I found hanging from a radiator in their house, the boxer that I thought would be my next world champion.
Because that was when you collapsed, wasn't it, Kelly?
Kelly had a
Didn't you
heart
collapse
attack.
a few days after that?
Yeah, and I had a heart attack. I collapsed then, yeah. And just before that, one of my colleagues who worked with me, I'm not sure if I covered it in the book, but he was sort of my right hand, and we worked together. But he was quite shy, quite introvert, and I never really got to the bottom of him. But he was so loyal to me, and we were great friends. He threw himself on the London to Brighton Express train.
Yeah.
And I realised that he must have been hiding something, and the boxer must have been hiding something. And I can't go on like that, because if I don't open up and be honest, it could. And I had attempted suicide. I'm not going to say I hadn't. I mean, it's obviously in the book. I attempted suicide a couple of times, but thank heavens there was no room for me up there, and there's certainly I hope there's no room for me down there either. So I was stuck on Earth. I think it's a reason why I'm here, and I had to face terms. And I remember my counsellor telling me that the minute I open the lid on the Pandora box, you can't put it back on. The genie's out of the bottle. And I was crying, sitting in the kitchen crying, and it was about 3 a.m. in the morning, and I was drinking heavily. And my partner came down to me, and she sort of said to me, "What's the matter? Is it your dad?" And I went, no. I said, "My dad's in a much better place now. He's at peace." She said, "Is it me? Have I done something wrong?" And I went, "No." She said, "Look," she said, "we don't go out no more. You've become such an introvert. You don't talk much in the family. Everything you've built is being destroyed." And I looked at her and I said, "I know." And she said, "Why?" She said, "Are you having a relationship?" And I went, "No." She said, "Are you gay?" And I said, "No." And then she said to me, "Well, what is it?" And I went, "I don't know how to tell you this, but I am like you." And she sort of looked, "So what do you mean?" I said, "I should never have been in this body from birth." And I broke down and cried. She put her arms around it and she said, "Look, we can work this out." And we never worked. We sort of did work it out, but we tried to live together, but it couldn't work. I started going to meetings that like trans living and places at weekends. I would say I was away working at boxing, and she sort of noticed a change in me. And eventually she said, "Look, you've got to be truthful to yourself. You need to go away and you need to ask yourself some questions." And I came to my house in Portugal, and it's quite isolated. My house was, and for the first time ever, I felt free. I started living a bit more as Kelly, and I went out and done things. I went to different places, and I felt so relaxed in myself and so natural. And then when I came back, I moved out of the family house and I joined a support group, and I started living as Kelly. And I had never had a problem anywhere I went. I was well received, well respected, but I never told anyone about my previous life. I just was Kelly, and if I had to meet anyone from my previous life, I went as Frank, which was quite hard. And then I broke down and told my oldest daughter, obviously, about it. And I remember the words of my daughter was she put her arms around me and she went, "Dad, we all thought you were seriously ill. We all thought you were going to die. She said, I'm pleased. She said, can I just say this to you? I would prefer my dad in a dress than in a wooden box. And I think that gave me the courage, even more courage I needed. And then, obviously, I started living more full-time as Kellie. And I became more active in my support group. And I didn't know that someone had worked out who I was, because I never let the two meet. I told people at the support group that I was a personal trainer. Maybe that was the mistake I made. I don't know. And I used to go, and I went to Pink Punters a few times, you know, and I started going out meeting other people, other trans women and some trans men. And I started feeling comfortable. And then I got the knock on the door from the newspapers, and it just shattered my life again. Because I went to see my lawyer, and my lawyer said, look, we can fight this. And we did start to fight it. And, you know, we stopped the newspaper from running the story, and my legal costs were running through the roof, but I had to live as Frank again. And to go back to that was very hard, because they were sitting outside my front door, hiding with cameras. And if they'd have got me coming out of the house dressed as Kellie, they could have published the photos. So I was in such turmoil. You know, I wrote letters about killing myself. I left them all over the place. But again, it was the support of my family that kept me going, I believe. And the love of my dogs, because I always feared no one would look after them. And eventually we had to sit down. My oldest daughter and my lawyer went and met with a number of newspapers. I would not go because I had to keep my distance. And my daughter and my lawyer finally came back with everything, and we went through everything. And we decided that the Mirror was the best people to go with because of what they gave us.
Yeah, did you not have another, sorry to interrupt here, but did you not have another incident where someone else had tipped off some photographers and they ended up getting pictures of you as Kellie?
Yes, yeah. Well, that's what they was when the newspaper knocks on the door. That was from the support group. I believe it was from the support group that I was going to in Worthing at the time. And they showed me the pictures, and I denied they were me. And that's when my lawyers and the QC, we fought the newspapers and managed to stop it. You know, and it cost me a hell of a lot of money. I mean, you know, the legal cost for the QC alone was unbelievable. But it was worth it, because it gave me the control. And so that, well, the QC also was involved in the discussions, and he said to me, look, you've got two choices. You can either let it come out on the internet, which it will do eventually. If one of these papers post it over to some colleague in America and it's posted, well, there's nothing we can do about it. We have no control over the internet. It's like the Wild West. Or you can come out with the story yourself and post it yourself, like the swimmer did, young Tom, the diver, sorry.
Tom Daly, yeah.
Tom Daly, yeah. Or you can go to a newspaper and you can do the story of a newspaper. And so we looked at all the options, and eventually we decided with the Sunday Mirror, because they gave us editorial rights, they gave us picture rights, they gave us headline rights, and every word to be used was to be used right, and it was to be checked by one of my counsellors to make sure that all the pronouns were right. And the one thing I insisted on was the word sex change could never be used, because I wasn't having a sex change, I was having a gender reassignment. You know, biologically, I am a male. I can't deny that, but I'm a medically constructed woman. That's how I look at it, and that's how I explain myself. I have the feelings of a woman. I have the emotions of a woman, and I've always had them, even as Frank. And you know, let's be honest. If you read a lot about Frank, you know that Frank wasn't always the nicest person. Didn't always say the right things.
No, I mean, I was just going to bring that up because, of course, on page 16 here, you know, you're talking about when the story came out, you often read stories about people in the transgender community that angered and upset you. They often seem to poke fun at the individuals concerned. When being a transsexual and wanting to transition is not a trivial matter. I could totally agree with that. Kellie, you know, I know it's not a trivial matter. You know, I've got friends, although I'm a cis lesbian, I've got friends who have transitioned, you know. But by the same token, in 2004.
I know what you're going to say, yes. And
you stood as London Mayor for UKIP and made certain comments, which I won't go into in detail.
I'm happy to say the comments because I know they were wrong and I shouldn't have said them. But, you know, I always say this, you can hide from your past, but you can run from your past, but you can't hide from your past. So those comments will always haunt me. So will certain other issues that are in that book. But I felt I had to be honest and be open about the truth, because there's no point, because now with the internet and social media, you know, when I grew up in the boxing world and I was taught by some of the best promoters and great promoters of the past, and they always used to say, there's no such thing as bad publicity because the next day it's chip paper. And that was right up to a certain point till someone invented the internet. And now everything you say lives forever. So I can't hide from what I said in 2004. I am honestly, they were said in jest more than me, because I was trying to be lighthearted. They were wrong what I said. And the journalist that said them, it made his day because he was just a local journalist sitting at the table, but he sold it to a national newspaper. And that's when it went crazy. And then obviously I had everyone attacking me for my homophobic comments, and I was classed as homophobic, you know, but I wasn't.
But can you see though that they would have caused offence, because obviously,
Yes.
you know, like that was just after clause 28, of course, and like I think in the interview you said something about that you stood for family values, which is of course is what the Tory party were pushing with clause 28.
I know, and look, you have to remember, I always say you're a product of your society. I was brought up as in a very strict Roman Catholic family, and there was never a grey area. It was always
Black and
white. But you know, and even as I grew up in a macho world of boxing promoters, and you know, if you heard how they spoke about certain subjects, even spoke about their wives and their women, you would die, because these guys think they are all powerful, you know. And it's a crazy world. It's, you know, it's a world that, in a way, I'm glad I lived in that world, because it's made me the better person I am today. It's made me more open and more understanding about everything. And it's made me realize there's also, not only is there a grey area in the world, there's also a world full of multicolours, and it's a beautiful world if you look at it right. So my education in the past has helped me develop the personality and the person I am sitting here today. And that person is much more happier, much more contented, and very accepting of people. I have a quote that I use. I'm going to read it to you. I use it in my speaking blogs. I've got to find it. I should have had it ready. But, here it is in this book. And I think, you know, I would never have realised this if I hadn't probably lived the way I had lived, and made the mistake I had. Everyone has the right to. Oh, no, that's not the one. Hang on, I rewrote it. I've got so many quotes that I use. It is. You have the right. Everyone has the right to disagree with me and not understand what I've been through. As long as you do not disagree with my right to exist and to be treated with respect, the same as I would treat and show you, because no matter what my gender, sexuality, religion, or the colour of my skin is, we are all members of the human race, and we will all leave this world the same way in a wooden box. And to me, I always use them words now because they're very important to me, because it's true. And I never used to think like that before. You're right. You know, all I thought about was protecting myself, protecting my family, my own success. And I probably was a very selfish, excuse my French, little bastard that didn't care about anything.
Can I ask you what your views are on the LGBT community now? I mean, I know in another interview you've gone and said that you think that the LGB should be slightly separate from the T, because the T is more to do with, you know, the gender?
Yeah, I am from the movement in the trans world that do think that way. I also think we can all learn from each other. We can learn a lot from the LGBT community, which has fought hard to get the recognition they've got today, and you know, are much more accepted in society than the trans community are. I also think it's very if it wasn't confusing, I wouldn't care about it, but it's very confusing for a lot of people who don't understand that a trans woman is more about a gender than a sexuality. And until you choose your sexuality and your partner, you're, you know, I've got a trans friend who got married to a heterosexual male. And as far she does not see herself as a member of the LGBT community, because as far as she's concerned, she's a heterosexual woman. She sees herself as part of the trans community because it was all about her gender, not her sexuality. For me, I always say my gender is who I go to bed as, my sexuality is who I wake up next to. And up to this day, I've only woke up next to my dog. So what does, you know, what does that make me? You know, I don't know my sexuality, and that's the truth. I have been out with men. I have been out with some women for dinner. You know, you know, and I don't understand all the different genders and sexualities that are coming out now, obviously being a very old fashioned and old school, but I learned to read about them and respect them. And I think I'm probably pan-romantic, which means that it's the person I want to fall in love with. And I'm quite happy for romance, closeness, companionship, sharing my life. But the sex side does not really matter to me. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody, and I'm happy to hear
it does.
Everyone's views on that as we later on. But that's how I feel in myself. You know, to me, it wouldn't matter if I walk into a room, it's a woman or a man. If the light goes on in my head and I can connect with that person, that's the person I want to share the rest of my life with. But I also, in my own head, think that I may spend the rest of my life alone, but having a nice social circle, which I have got.
Because you're living in the Algarve now, aren't you, Kelly?
Yep, I live in the middle of nowhere. I live with 3 dogs, 2 goats, a turkey, 3 little piglets that I rescued the other week that were found in a cardboard box, 4 chickens and 2 guinea fowls. So that's my life now, and you know, it takes up a lot of my time, and I'm very happy. My nearest neighbours are half a mile away from me, so and I sort of, in a way, I've retired from public life. I still do a lot of diversity speaking and mental health speaking. I've started back in boxing, but in a very small way.
How's that going?
Yeah, it's going okay, except for obviously with
COVID.
we're all in lockdown, so I can't really move my young boxer forward. It's a female boxer that I'm dealing with. Yeah, so but life, if I'm honest, I couldn't be happier than I'm happier now than I've ever been in my life, and to me that means something.
Do you think that's because you've been true to yourself? Do you think you would have been as happy if you hadn't transitioned?
I think if I hadn't transitioned, I wouldn't be here today. I was destroying everything around me. I was destroying my relationship with Tracy, who we're still very good friends. We speak on a regular basis. We share a lot because we have 2 lovely daughters. I'm also much more friendly with my first partner, Jackie, who I didn't speak to for ages, the mother of Emma, my eldest daughter. I'm closer to my 3 daughters, because I never really saw any of my daughters grow up because I was always traveling. I was always away from them. I was always too busy to share in a lot of things. I actually think we're more of a family now than we was when I was Frank.
Do you regret not having, accepted your true self sooner?
Yes and no. yes, because maybe my life would have been a lot easier. I wouldn't have been such a public figure, and I would have been like my friend, just gelled into the world and just lived a nice, complete, comfortable life. No, because I would never have had my daughters that are very important to me, and they share my life with me. You know, it's great to have a daughter to say, where do you think you're going dressed like that? No, you're not going out dressed like that. You know, or you've got too much makeup on, and it's lovely. You know, I can't explain it. It's a very strange relationship with my daughters, and a very loving relationship. We speak every day, all of us. We share a lot of secrets. You know, my daughters tell me things now they never used to tell me as Frank. And I feel I'm so much closer to them.
Is there anything that you haven't done yet that you'd still like to do in your career?
No, I think I've lived a very full life.
Yeah, I mean, you've been an apprentice jockey, an apprentice chef. You know, you've worked at a college, you know, in a managerial position, you know, project manager, run pubs, and now you seem to have a great life on, as well as being a fantastic boxing promoter who organised Frank Bruno's first amateur fight, the one that he lost to Joe Christie. It's the only one fight that he did lose as an amateur, isn't it?
That's right. That was in the Old Kent, just off of the Old Kent Road, the Radical Workingmen's Club. Yep, that cost me £100 and all the Guinness Joe Crystal could drink. And our club, which was a little backstreet club that was started by my father and a couple of his friends to get young kids off the street. That fight made our club one of the most successful clubs of the time. And you know, I think we've done a lot of good work in the community, getting young people off the street there and offering them an alternative. You know, I'm a great believer that sport is a great breakdown of every barrier: religion, color of skin. You know, it's very different. At the moment, it's very hard. The only thing I think that's wrong with sport is it's not as accepting in diversity as it should be. It's getting better, but it's still not, you know, it's a long way off. I think that's one of the things that we should all work at being, because everyone has the right to take part in sport. If you're gay, if you're a trans woman, if you're a trans man, if you're disabled, you have a right to take part in sport, I believe. You know, and I always found, you know, I grew up in a time when Northern Ireland was at war with Britain and the Republic of Ireland. Yet, if you went there at a boxing event, which I did do, you were really accepted. So I found sport was always a way of breaking down barriers. But I also found, since coming out, if you are gay or you are trans, sport is a very hard thing to get back into.
Are you still in contact with some of the people that you were in contact with then? Is Lennox Lewis, for example, in contact with you?
If I'm honest, no, I'm not in contact with Lennox Lewis. He put out a statement. There is a film that's just come out about Lennox's life, and I am in it. It's called Tough Love. But no, we don't. We have not been in contact since my transitioning. But other members of the boxing community, yes, a couple of people I work with have been very helpful with my coming back into boxing and helping me with Kathy's career. So, you know, again, it all depends on the person. You know, I've got some people that I really helped in their career in boxing. They will not even answer the phone to me.
That's bad, but then I think that's what we all find at times.
Yeah, but you know, I just think to myself, you know what? It's their loss.
It is.
It's not my loss. You know, maybe they shouldn't have been in my life from the word go. And that's what I'm saying. You have to rid yourself of all the negativity in your life. If you can do that, you become a totally different person. And by transitioning, I've done that.
That's really good. I just hope that you can do more to help in sport, you know, to break down the barriers.
Well, I'm trying, but if I'm honest, I am a little bit. I do like the peaceful life I live now. and having the time to myself and being out of the public eye. You know, I've turned down a lot of TV work recently because I don't want to keep being in the public eye. There is a documentary out about me at the moment on Amazon Prime called Frank to Kelly, and there is a film being made about my life, which will be coming out in the middle of this year by the same American company that made the Lennox Lewis one. They were so impressed with my life and what I've done, and they believe it will break a lot of barriers down. So they've really put quite a bit of work into it, and it's one of the reasons I agreed to do it. It's a feature documentary, actually, but the reason I agreed to do it was they actually using trans actors and actresses in it to play the roles that, like the person that are playing me is actually a trans woman, and I've met her on Zoom and we've chatted regular. She's obviously American because it was all filmed in America, and the meetings where I attended, they've used all trans people, which I think is really good. And that was one of the reasons I agreed to do it.
That's good. That's positive casting. That's what we need to see more of.
Yeah.
I speak as an equity member here.
Yeah.
So now I'd like to open it. Thank you, Kelly. I'd like to open it up if a few other people have got questions, because I know we're running short of time. So,
well, I'm happy to come back on again anyway.
Pauline.
Thank you. Hi, Kelly. It was great listening to that. And can I say your story resonated quite powerfully with me? I mean, we transitioned at about the same time, but at a similar age as well. And when I read your book, I found it extremely, affirming and helpful to me and inspiring even. So thank you. Of course, there were certain differences. I mean, I never managed Lennox Lewis, and I was never, ever a Millwall Town supporter. That's really something to be ashamed of, I think. I was going to ask you if you're a fan of women's boxing, but clearly you are, because you're now managing, a young woman boxer. I was just wondering, how would you fancy going a few rounds with Nicola Adams?
No, I think she'd be too good for me, too young for me. She's a lovely girl. It was sad to see her have to leave Strictly Come Dancing because of her partner getting COVID. But she had a great career ahead of her, but it was cut short, wasn't it, due to medical reasons. Yeah, she was very good because she was very open about her sexuality and she spoke well. Yeah, she's a very nice person, Nicola.
And she's from Leeds, furthermore.
Yes, I know she's from Leeds. Yes, because I worked up in Leeds with a boxer called Carl Johansson. His uncle was the first black footballer to play in an FA Cup final. I'll see if you know, he played for Leeds.
He did, and he was called Albert.
That's it, Albert Johansson. That's it, yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Can you hear me? How do you sort of find someone you know they're going to be a champion? What is it you see in someone? How do you do it? You obviously got the skills.
Well, no, you look at their background, you look at their pedigree. You can't take I'll use a very old saying, you can't take a pig and turn it into a silk purse. So you can't take anyone off the street and make them a champion. You can take them off the street, you can teach them the basics. But if they've got the commitment and the desire, then you've got a chance. To be good at anything, it's total commitment of one's life. I'll give you Lennox Lewis. When we met with Lennox, he decided that he was not going to have a personal life until he became the world champion and retired. And if you ever watch that film that I was talking about called Tough Love, you will see that's exactly what he done. He was so committed to achieving his ultimate dream that he just gave everything up. It is about commitment and it is about dedication. And you've got to give any sport, not just, I don't know if some of your Netflix have watched Queen Gambit. If you saw the commitment even to that, just playing chess, my God, it has to become an obsession. And to be honest, when I signed Lennox Lewis, my life became obsessive to take him to the world heavyweight title, because he was a former Olympic gold medalist. And I realized that if he didn't win the world title, I may be the one that got the blame for it. So my whole life was wrapped up in that the 12 to 13 years we worked together. My life was wrapped up in that. I can't hear you, sorry.
Hi.
Have you
Ruth, sorry.
Have you made any mistakes? You've got somebody who thought they're going to be good and they haven't done it.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. Listen, if you don't make mistakes, you're not human. You know, I've made the wrong matches for a couple of fighters. I've put a fighter in too soon. Yeah, they're the mistakes you make, but you learn by your mistakes, don't you? Well, hopefully you do. Yeah.
Kelly, thank you ever so much. That was really interesting. I'm interested in all the sports angles. I used to be very involved in women's tennis, and that obviously was where maybe we started to see certainly sort of strong lesbian women. And it's strange in a way, because we've never really seen that replicated in the male side of tennis. But that's not my question. I'm interested if you could say a little bit more about the work you said about mental health. And that's another passion of mine. I'm very aware in Britain, in England, we've got a new programme about HIV/AIDS starting tomorrow evening.
I think I saw that on my Twitter accounts.
Yeah, I mean, my memories of those times when I'd gone to London to train, I was working in mental health, but you know, I lost as many friends to suicide in those years as I did to HIV/AIDS, people who became positive, who couldn't reconcile that with their families, etc. So I know some things have changed, but particularly with COVID, everything else, it's incredibly difficult. I'd just be interested in, you know, what areas around mental health you're working in.
Well, I'm not an expert. Obviously, I can only talk about my own experience. Like in 2018, October 2018, I actually woke up chained to a bed in a psychiatric hospital here in Portugal. I attempted suicide because I got involved with someone and the messages were wrong. And I started drinking heavily, and I remember I came home actually to talk at an NHS mental health suicide convention. And this person, I won't name her, she'd been in my life for a while, and her family were very much against me. Her father knew me as Frank Maloney, and he thought I was weird and perverted because of what I'd done. And she grew quite close to me, and we started sharing a lot of things. We started going out to dinner. She came here to Portugal, spent quite a lot of time with me, but we were drinking quite a lot through that time. And then one time she asked, could she bring a couple of her family members out, and I allowed them to come out, and we got chatting, and and in the end I just like lost it, and I lost it, and I said to the couple, look, nothing is going on between me and so. We're just good friends. If you think there is, and it's going to destroy your family, I'm going to end the friendship. And I went to bed, left them all out. And that night, you know, and I've never really spoken about this other than briefly. Took me a long time to be able to face what I'd done. And that night she came in and she got into bed with me, and she started kissing me, and she said, look, everything's going to be all right. I want to be with you. And I said, I hope so. I said, because, you know, anyway, the next day, but then early as the morning, she said, look, I better go back to my own room in case they wake up and they find us in bed together. And I said, yeah, I understand. So the next day I went off walking with my dogs. I came back and we were sitting by the pool and we were chatting. And I said to her, I hope you're all right with what you done last night. And she went, yes. Then she went home, and as I said, I was home doing this talk, so I phoned her to chat to her, and she went, look, I've got to say something to you. I wasn't kissing Kelly, I was actually kissing Frank Maloney, and it threw my head and it freaked me totally out. And I said, what do you mean? she went, look, if you could retransition back to Frank, even just live as Frank, I'd be with you. And I said, but that's not who I am. Anyway, I got on the plane. I had a bottle of wine on the plane. I got off the plane. I went and had something to eat. I just drunk that night, and I came back to my villa, and I had a friend staying with me, who was my former counsellor, who still keeps an eye on me. She comes out every so often to see me. And she said, "What's the matter, Kelly?" And I said, "Oh, nothing." I said, I'm just a little bit depressed." I said, "It was such a hard, and some of the stories at today's convention were quite sad," which they was. Anyway, I continued drinking, and I took loads of different pills. I honestly don't know what I took. And then next thing, as I say, I woke up the next day, my daughter at the end of my bed. I was chained to a bed in a Portuguese hospital. And it was the most frightening thing that ever happened to me in my life. And it took me ages to get over that. And I realized that we all have this dark tunnel that we may live in, or it's above our head. And I still have it, but it's how I deal with it now is what I talk about. And, you know, I realize if you let yourself go into this tunnel, if you can't see the light and pull yourself out, there's no what, you just sink further and further into the tunnel and you won't come out of the tunnel. And that nearly happened to me. So now if I feel myself going into that tunnel, I pick up the phone and I either talk to the person I mentioned, Jan, my ex-counsellor. I either speak to one of my daughters, or I will phone a friend, or I will go on social media and chat with a few people. I think the best way to deal with mental health is to be open and honest and not be afraid to talk about it. And, you know, that's the message I try to get across to someone. If you've got a colleague at work and you think they're not performing, they're not try and be friendly to them. Try and find out what the problem is. Don't pry into it, but do it in a nice way. Invite them for a coffee. You know, there's so many different ways. You know, I have a group on Instagram that I go on maybe once a week and we chat. And there's a few people there, and some of the stories, you know, they then message me privately and we chat, and I'll go on the phone and chat to them. And they tell me it's really helped them. So I believe counselling is very important. I would recommend counselling to anybody. I don't care how tough you are, how strong you are. You need someone that you can talk to, and you need friends that you can talk to. Don't isolate yourself away like I did. Don't look for the answer in a bottle, because there is no answer in a bottle. The more you drink that bottle, the more you sink into that tunnel. So
it's very difficult to do. I agree with so much of what you're saying. It's so difficult to do that.
Yes, I know.
You know, it's sort of, it's brought, you know, it's extra emphasized. And I think,
but I think
people are isolated and perhaps are, you know, sort of drinking more and
yeah,
you know, finding some solace from that.
See, but I know not to drink. I do not drink indoors because I know if I drink indoors, I could go into that dark tunnel. And that's the honest truth. I do not drink any alcohol indoors if I'm alone. You have to find what are the triggers that send you into that place. Once you can find those triggers, then you can overcome. I know I'm never going to cure my issues that I have in my head fully, but I know I've got to learn to control them, and I've got to learn how to keep the switch up, let's say, instead of letting it come down. And since that incident in 2018, I sold the house I lived in Portugal. I bought this house and I remodeled it, give me something to do. It was a very old farmhouse, and I bought my animals. And to me, that's my life now. And obviously talking on to people, you know, I love talking to people. As you can gather, I never shut up.
Could I ask a question, please?
Yeah.
First of all, I totally get you. I'm on the same page in separating gender from sexuality. I'm from the intersex community, so we don't even get a letter usually. We don't even always get the I. But in terms of the question, is you say you came from a quite strict religious family. has your experience made you more or less religious? And if more or the same, then do you look back on a loving God and say, why have you done this?
Yeah, that's a very hard question because I was obviously brought up, as I say, in an Irish Catholic family. It's sort of drummed into you. I have a fear of God, and I'm honest. I have a fear of God. I don't know how to put. I believe there is a God, but I also say to myself, do you know what? I'm going to use it as an insurance policy. If I believe there is a God and I die and there is a God, great, because I believed in him. I've got a chance of going to the right place. If there isn't a God, I haven't lost anything. So I look at it as, it's a bit of a cheeky way of looking at it, as a bit, but I still pray in my own way. I don't go to church no more. And, you know, I brought my children up different. All my children were Christian Catholics, obviously, because that's what my grandparents, but I let my children choose at a certain age if they wanted to go to church or not. And to this day, none of my children go to church anymore. I still go to church. If I'm sad and I'm honest, I will go and sit in a church. It can be a Catholic church. It can be an Anglican church. It can be a Methodist church. I will go and sit in that church. I find peace in the quietness of a church. And I talk to some of the statues, you know, I do believe there is a God. But I also think, why are there so many wicked things that happen in the world if there is a God, and this God is all about love and peace? But my mother, who's now got dementia, but before, when I used to question her on these subjects, she used to say to me, God gives you a choice. He puts you on this earth to make that choice. He's not ruling you. He's not a dictator. You know, you either choose the path of goodness or you choose the path, being a Catholic, of old Nick down there. So yeah, I do believe there's a God, but I'm not, you know, I'm not over religious, if you understand, and as I say, I speak to God. You know, I often say to my dad, do you know what? Please come and tell me, is there life after we bury you or we cremate you? He's never come back to me. So, you know, and if I've been to a spiritualist, just because I try everything once. I'm one of these. I'm a bit like, put it like this. I'm like Doubting Thomas, who said at the Last Supper, I do not believe Jesus has risen until I put my hands through the holes in his hands. I think that sums me up.
Thank you.
Katie, do you have a question?
Yeah. Again, I'm a trans woman, and I had the same discussion with my wife about, do you wish you'd done it earlier? You know, when we were courting, if you'd have said then how you felt, then, you know, she could have gone off and found somebody that she could live with in her old age, and you could have gone off and been Katie, you know, right at the beginning. I said yes, but I wouldn't choose that, because then I wouldn't have my daughters, I wouldn't have my granddaughters. So I wouldn't choose Katie over the children that the family that I've had, because I love them so much. And I was quite prepared to keep Katie in the sidelines, hidden away, and just do what I could do for my family. They're the most important thing to me.
But can I ask you something, Katie? Because I've been told this by people, that I was selfish to do what I'd done. I was selfish to get married. I was selfish to bring children into this world, knowing what I was getting, knowing what was inside me. Yeah, I've had that level against me as well, and yes, it's to a certain extent it is cowardice, but in my instance, it's a survival instinct. And also,
I'm non-confrontational. I don't like arguments. So, if anybody found out about it, there would be so much upset, even in the family, when I knew I was transgender and not just different from everybody else. The amount of grief that would have caused, I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want it for them, and I wouldn't want it for me.
and if you could have taken a pill to stop your transition, would you have taken that pill?
No, because it would have stopped me being who I am. And I'm like you. I was born a woman. In my head, I'm a woman. At the time, I only knew I was different. The problem is, I've got a birth defect. My body doesn't match my mind, and it's your mind where you are, not your body. Your personality, your soul, whatever it is, the essence that's you is in your head. And to have changed that for the convenience of everybody else would have meant, just abandoning who I was.
I must admit, at the early stages, if I could have taken the pill, I would have taken the pill. And if I could have convinced myself that I was a transvestite and just wanted to dress at weekends, I would have done that. Because I was so concerned about losing my family, because they were what kept me going, to be honest. And I felt that I betrayed them as well. And I'm also a great believer. A lot of, and I'm not talking about all trans people, but I've met a lot of trans people who actually think this journey is just about them. And they are so wrong. That's probably one of the reasons why I don't fit as well into a lot of the trans groups, because this journey is about your family, the people you bring on this journey, the people you work with, the people that you shared your life with. It's just not about you. It's not just about you becoming you. You take everyone else on this journey, and you also, as I say, I'm very lucky. Probably like yourself, Katie, you've kept your family close to you and they've supported you. Some of them don't. Have I got 5 minutes to read a poem to you, which I think is that a young girl had to read out at her father's funeral. I think
absolutely.
I think it's so important.
Yeah. If anybody's running out of time, then they just leave. We have had these meetings go on for another half an hour or more.
This poem has really it's made me realise, this happened. I was in the Big Brother house, as many of you might have known if you watch reality television, but I don't. And this girl contacted my daughter, and her and my daughter sort of chatted, and they didn't tell me this till well after, because my daughter said, do you know what, I really thought I would have to do the same that you've done for your dad. The poem is called In a War, and I think that for a 16-year-old, she was 17 when she read this poem out, for a 17-year-old child to have to read this at a parent's funeral, it's such an indictment on our society we live in. My dad was at constant war. As I digest, you'll understand more. It wasn't until recently that I found out he had a dream only he knew about. I admired my dad for his bravery and strength, but now I know this was his self-defense. He walked with pride, so manly and tough. What other people thought he couldn't give a stuff. A typical man when it came to emotions, but deep within he was brutally broken. My dad, Robert, wanted to be Robin. Inside was this woman. For years she'd been sobbing. As he started to admit who he wanted to be, my dad, he wanted to become a she. This woman was ready to be true. So I said, Dad, I accept you for you. But he was tortured throughout the years, finally admitting it brought him painful tears. He felt alone, trapped and torn. Hence here today is why I mourn. People would yell, say he's a freak, as he wore his wig, acceptance he seek. He couldn't handle the pressure or stress. I'm telling him, Dad, you shouldn't care less. On the phone I'd be while he cried to me. Daughter, he said, I just want to be free. There is only one way out. I am sorry. People say it's selfish how my dad died. To stop him a few times is what I tried. I won't judge him for what he done. I won't call him selfish, stupid or dumb. He, she's at peace now. And to my dad I vow, I will never forget you. I will always love you. As you wrote to me in a letter, I am your best friend, your princess, and above all, your daughter. That will never change. And I think that is...
It's beautiful, very moving.
Yeah. And it's, to me, that's a real bad mark on our society, that a child, and there was a brother involved who I had met, and the brother could never accept what the dad had gone through. He just said his dad died in an accident, he told everyone. And then the daughter asked if I would come and meet the brother, and he was about 15. I went and met him, and we talked about my life. I told him about my boxing. His dad was actually a karate teacher and was very good at karate. So his dad was a real macho man to the son. Anyway, then I took the son to one of my support groups, and he'd met so many different people and so many different trans women. And the next thing I knew, his sister sent me a message and said, you've got to go onto the Facebook page and read this. He actually then wrote a whole thing about his dad being transgender and how sorry he was for not accepting his dad. And to me, that was such a remarkable thing to do for a young man, because he knew nothing about it. He judged it wrong. It is all about education. The more, like Katie said, the more we can educate people about gender and sexuality, everyone's life is going to be easier, I believe.
Yeah, it will. Thank you for that. That was lovely.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Can I just ask one further question?
Yeah.
When we transitioned, back in 2014 or wherever, it seemed to be, a time of real hope, of progress. So being trans seemed to be becoming, more accepted, much more tolerance. It seemed to be possible. But last year, was frankly a disaster for the trans community in the UK. When the government refused to reform the Gender Recognition Act, despite the overwhelming majority of respondents being in favour of it. And there were setbacks in other ways as well. How do you see things now, Kellie, for the future? Do you think it's always going to be one step forward and another step back? Or do you think there has been real progress, and is that going to continue? I mean, a particular issue for many trans people actually is not so much the reform of the Gender Recognition Act, which really only gives you a new birth certificate, although it has a lot of symbolic value, but the fact that the gender clinics in Britain, which most people have to depend on, are utterly overwhelmed. You have trans people waiting years for their first appointment at gender clinics. And of course, we've had that dreadful judgment in the High Court that said before a child can be put on puberty blockers, it has to be approved by the court. These are all pretty awful developments. Can you see much hope for us at the moment?
I always like to think there is hope. I always like to think there's light at the end of the tunnel. But I also think, some of us are our own worst enemies. We demand too much. There's so much else going on in the world as well. I'm not an activist, obviously, and I have no intention of being an activist. I think it will be how we, present herself. I understand that the health issue is fine. That's all about money, isn't it? The government haven't got the money to more clinics. You know, at this moment, no one's getting any medical support. If you've got cancer or anything, or, you know, if you go into hospital now, you might never be coming out. That's the issue we've got now. You know, when I had my gender reassignment operation, I spoke to my surgeon, Mr. Thomas, and he was telling me the problem is not enough doctors or surgeons want to go down this road. I think there's only about 3 in Britain that can do the operation, isn't there, if I'm not mistaken? 3 or 4, I'm not sure. You know, so again, it's all about education, isn't it? You know, what I say, look, I believe it is a medical issue. I don't know if you agree with me or if Katie agrees with me. I think being born with gender dysphoria is a medical issue, because if you were born with a hole in your heart, or you were born with a hand missing or a leg missing, the doctors can see that, or a kidney, they can see that when they medically examine you, and they can correct that at birth. But as Katie said, it's our brain that is different to our body, and you can't see into anyone's brain yet. We're not that far advanced in medical research. If we could see into our brain, it could be corrected at birth. Like Norman says, he's from the intersex family, and I know intersex, you're born with 2 sexual organs, aren't you, Norman?
It's a spectrum, so it can be quite, where it could be down to your chromosomes, but it could be to what people might think as a hermaphrodite, and everything in the middle. So I was born essentially female, but I had an underdeveloped set of female organs.
Yeah.
But then the 2 stages, you get hormones in your from the fetal position, from the fetus stage, you get an injection of testosterone, and then one at puberty. So at puberty, I developed male characteristics.
So was you brought up as a girl?
It was very complicated because my mother wanted a boy. So at birth, I was not determined one way or another. It was up to the clinic. Obviously, I was a baby. The clinicians was deciding who I was, essentially, which is where all the madness starts. But my mother wanted a boy, so therefore she had my birth registered as male. This was before the clinicians had decided. So I spent time growing up in my initial years as a boy, but then when I hit puberty and started having periods and developing breasts, I was also at the same time developing male characteristics. So I was losing hair, and my voice was deepening. So there was all sorts of madness going on in the biological way. So, but predominantly, I was female.
Sorry, let me just delete this.
I've muted you, Kelly. Can you unmute?
I'm back on. Am I back on?
Yeah, you're back on.
Yeah, no, that's the reason I asked. No, because I have a friend. She was born intersex, and she grew up as a male, got married, had children. She's actually a minister, and later in life, she obviously fully transitioned to being a female. But you know, and we talked about it a little bit, and I think, you know, that is hard. I mean, who has the right to decide what way to put you?
Well, that exactly, because the people were deciding that right from birth, and I didn't get a say in that, so it caused a lot of confusion. So I had a relationship as a woman, but then after I had my daughter, then I had a lot of postnatal depression. Went for counselling, much as you experience, talked things through, and realised everything was a bit of a mess, and I didn't know where I was. And then, you know, subsequent to that, the relationship broke down, and I've lived as a male as much as possible since. So I function in society as a male, but at the same time, I am biologically female with male attributes, which is, you know, the way the hormones are affected me naturally. But I also take hormones now to enhance maleness.
Yeah, see, it's amazing. These for me, even like having these chats are so learning, because I learn things. I mean, everyone thinks because you transitioned, you know everything about gender and sexuality. And it's an amazing world. That's what I'm saying about this diversity world we now live in. It is an absolutely amazing world. And you just learn so much and so many new things. I mean, Norman there is just, you know, it's absolutely amazing. And, you know,
it's a spectrum, Kelly. A lot of people think it's, if you're born intersex, then you're born with two sets of genitals. But it ranges from having an enlarged clitoris and usually a small pocket vagina, which is basically where I was, right through to having both a penis and a vagina. And I think there's an MP, I can't remember what the MP's name is, but basically his urethra is around his scrotum area. And because it's developed, but that's also classed as being intersex, because everybody starts off as being female. Everybody is a female to begin with, and it's whether through hormones you become male and you get testes, or whether you get ovaries, and sometimes they get caught between. So some people will be born with an internal testes, and all manner of things. At last count, I think there were 33 definitions of intersex people. So it's not one or the other. There's and everybody, in my experience in meeting people, they're all unique, and their situation is usually quite different. You know, there's no categories, and even the clinicians can't agree on where one thing is and where one thing isn't. But it's easier for it's as again in terms of the trans community as well. It's easier to make a whole than add something, if you see what I mean.
David,
easier to cut something off than it is to keep back on again.
It's, can I just say, it's absolutely fascinating listening. I think that I mean, I've always been a gay man. I knew that when I was 7, but I married a woman because I didn't think my parents or society would accept it. And I've got 2 lovely daughters, and I don't regret that. I don't feel guilty. But others might feel perhaps I shouldn't have done that. But once my children were born, I couldn't leave them. And I only divorced and left my wife when my children were older. So it's the same for, you know, a gay man as well. I knew what I was, and I'd experienced that as a teenager. So I had, and it was very clear that I chose another route, and I don't regret it. But obviously my wife probably holds that against me. I'm not sure she'll ever forgive me. I think probably when I left her that I didn't tell her, and she found out 6 months later. She never suspected. And I think that's the bit she can't forgive, probably. But my children have been amazing. So it's never easy. And I think understanding what people go through is so important to educate people. As Kelly, we've heard what you've been through. And I think, especially, I'm a gay man, I find trans and quite difficult. I do find it quite difficult to understand, and having spoken to Katie, first of all, helped me tremendously to understand what she felt, and she wanted, she was a woman, but she was born a man. But it is hard for others, and I think that even our own community can be very harsh And that saddens me, but the only way is through education.
Yeah,
the big problem with it is the issue that you said about LGBT and T is society wants to fit you into a box.
Yes.
And they want the boxes to be separate and clearly defined as to what they are. And that's not the way the world works. Yeah. There's the thing about humankind is that it's variety all the way through the natural world. There is variety in it, even in a particular defined area. There will still be variety within that, and it's the same with people. And you can try and force them into a box, but it limits your understanding.
See, I think that's the problem. You're right, Katie. I think that's the problem with society. They, or the establishment. Let's say the establishment like to. Yeah. If you're not part of the establishment, you've got to fit into another box.
Yeah.
And not one box, as we say, fits everybody. We can't all be like Donald Trump. We can't all be like Joe Biden. We can't all be like Kellie Maloney. We can't all be like David. We can't all be like Norman. The world is made up of totally individual people. The one thing that we all are is we're all human beings and we're all members of the same race.
Yeah.
And for me, it doesn't matter if you don't accept me, respect me. It's all about respect for each other. It's not about, I know lots of people can't accept me, so that's fine, but don't diss me. Don't disregard my right to exist and live, because I pay taxes. I'm a member of the human race, and that's it.
Yeah, I always say that with people who complain about how somebody presents, and I would say to them, look, if you want people to respect you for who you are and how you live, you have to respect everybody else.
Yeah.
Do you agree with it or not? Whether you're in favor of it, you have to respect their choice. That is how they live. Otherwise, you can't expect the respect for yourself.
Yeah, and I think that was something that, as Frank Maloney, I didn't do. I didn't respect a lot of people. No. Maybe that was as a defense mechanism. But because of the journey I've been through, I've learned that life is totally different, and we must learn to respect each other, even if I don't understand. I certainly, Norman's saying there's 33 different intersex categories. Last time I looked, there was 133 different genders on Facebook, and I don't know how many sexualities there are, because I got fed up looking. But as long as these people are respectful of each other, and if it's two consenting adults doing what they want to do, we should have a problem with it. No. I'm not sure if everyone agrees with that, but that's how I look at life now. Yeah. It's up to David, Norman, Pauline, Elizabeth, Katie, Kelly to live our lives the way we want to live it, as long as we live it within the structure of the law of the country we live in.
And as long as we're kind to people, as long as we're considerate of others, then that's it.
Yeah, I think we should, we should have LGBTQ and R, and the R should be respect, but that should also be heterosexual people's life, heterosexuals and R.
Yeah.
Don't forget the I, Kelly.
What's the I? Intelligence.
Insects.
So I class it. You're in our group.
But this is the problem with having letters and boxes is that if you have an I there for intersex, people will expect that to be somebody who has both sets of fully developed genitals.
But that's where the education comes in. They're talking about things, but without the I, you never get the conversation.
No.
I actually think you should. Then then maybe the I should be added to. They're adding every other letter. Stonewall add every other letter, don't they?
Yeah.
So why don't they add the I then?
Because by the time you finish, it's about this long.
Yeah. But if each
you know,
one of us, sorry, Kelly.
No, I'm just saying, listening to Norman, you know, I would never have known anything about. I had one view that you were born with two sexual organs, and the doctor decided which one it was. Yeah. That's how I thought intersex was.
And some people are, Kelly, but that's at one end of the spectrum. But the other end of the spectrum is it can be down to your chromosomes. It can be it can be a chromosome level where you're determined which gender you are.
But what I mean, Norman, that shows you the education I know about intersex, and probably most other people are maybe very similar unless they're from that world or study gender and sexuality.
Absolutely, and that's why the eye stimulates the conversation, and hopefully everybody will go away knowing the eye exists, if you see what I mean, and start having a look at, you know, what's the information on that, and, you know, having a conversation.
Yeah, and going back to the question about the LGBT, I was doing a talk about transition at a university in London, and Stonewall were also there representing the trans community. But I was amazed they actually sent a gay man to talk about the trans community. And I questioned that, and he said, well, I've been on a course. And I went, look, I could not stand up and talk about a gay man, even though I've been on a course, because I've not lived in your shoes. You have never lived in my shoes or a trans person's shoes. So how can you? He actually got up, he got annoyed with me and walked off and left. But I felt I had to question that because, you know, if you are talking about a trans, you've got to send a trans person, and I'm sure Stone will have a lot of trans people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was put in a position like that, Kelly. You know, I'm a lesbian, you know, cis lesbian. I don't know trans issues. I'm a trans ally. You know, I've got friends who are trans. And things, but I made clear that if I went on it, there had to be other trans people, and that it was made clear that I was going on simply as a trans ally.
Yeah,
you know, which was accepted.
No, I agree, but he didn't. This guy was well, I can talk. I understand trans people because I've done a course. You can't do a course on being trans. There's no such thing.
No, exactly.
You know,
but you get, when you go on the courses, you get like the standard explanation of intersex, because it's the easiest one to understand.
Yeah.
And it isn't complicated. But reality is complicated. It's very rarely simple.
Unless you've lived in someone's shoes, you can't talk about it. I've got some very good friends, couple very good gay friends, and that they idolize me, and they're very, very good to me and very protective of me. Yet I check, but I can. They tell me things, and I look in amazement. They go, Kelly, why? I go, I just don't understand that, because I've never lived in their shoes. And you know, and we laugh about it, and they go, and we don't understand why Frank Maloney, who hated gay people, is now such a good friend of the gay community. And I sort of you know, and I think, yeah, it's true though, but life revolves all the time, and hopefully, as Pauline said, hopefully, you know, we will all be accepted for who we really are, and not put in boxes.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. I just want to now propose a vote of thanks to Kelly for being so generous with her time and being so interesting and inspiring and, you know, kind and compassionate towards us. So thank you very much, Kelly, on behalf of myself and the members. And now we'll go to Katie, who will second my vote of thanks on behalf of the trustees, I think.
Yeah. Yes. We really do appreciate you coming on, Kelly, and explaining your life and your experience for us. Again, it is a difficult situation to understand, and the more education we can get, the more people we can get who are willing to explain the differences and their experience of living through that life, I think the better we will all be. And as a board of trustees, we really do appreciate you taking the time to come on.
Thank you for inviting me. I mean, I've really enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll talk again, you know.
Yeah.
On social media.